And we are live and kicking. So remember, we're going to be talking about sports today. Brendan, we've got you that early. Fantastic stuff. So, Brendan, we're going to be talking about sports, of course, but tell us what's coming up.
Yeah, well, another jam-packed show to look forward to. So on Colombia's only live and interactive English language chat show, we're getting our game face on, and I even have a bit of a sporty top on as well, as we talk about sport in Colombia, as you mentioned, Oli. Now, you'd be forgiven for thinking that it's really only football, or soccer, if you will, and cycling that matter in this country. But there's a little bit more activity to the place than those big two. But are you a football fanatic and nothing else? Or are you, like Oli, a fan of some of the stranger sports that are played here, and underwater rugby, which he was mentioning to me the other day, that floods into my mind in that regard. Do let us know what sets your heart racing when it comes to sport in Colombia, be it as a participant or a spectator. You can write to us right now using the live comment facility, or if you're watching this recorded, you can send us a message via the medium on which you're viewing us, or send a tweet to @Bogotá Post. For that part of the program, by the way, we'll be joined by none other than the Bogotá Post sports editor, Freek Huigen. I hope I get my Dutch correct there. He'll correct me anyway, to get his considered thoughts on the topic. But first up, as we always do, it's our usual roundup of the news over the last week. And Oli, there's a caravan of indigenous people winding its way to us here in the capital from the southwest of the country. It's not a midterm break holiday that has this minga, as it's called, coming here. Why are they on the move?
Well, these are mainly indigenous people from the southwest of Bogotá. So think kind of Cauca, Valle de Cauca, Nariño, that kind of region down there. So there's Coconuco people, for example, and quite a few others. Now, they've taken a pretty heavy toll in killings of social leaders in recent weeks, in recent months. We've seen a lot of news about massacres, but there's been a lot of stuff that's gone under the radar. There's been a lot of stuff that doesn't necessarily grab the headlines because it's one person dead at a time, two people dead at a time. And it's this kind of drip thing that we usually have in Colombia, where blood is being shed constantly, and it doesn't always make the news. It's on the news for the indigenous communities that it's happening in, and they've decided that enough is enough, and they want the national government to pay attention.
Yeah, so basically they made their way to Cali, which would be the capital of Valle de Cauca, just before the weekend, the bank holiday weekend that we had last weekend. And the hope was that Duque would meet them there, but he hasn't. And this has been one of the cornerstones, that they want to have a meeting with Duque. But interestingly enough, they want Duque to go to their territory, meet them there on their terms. He seems to be holding firm that whether he meets them when they're here in Bogotá is another thing, but he doesn't seem too keen to go to their neck of the woods for whatever reason.
Well, I mean, this is something that I find quite odd. They not only do they insist on speaking to the president, they're insisting on speaking only to the president. So the government have sent down representatives, and we're not talking about jokers or clowns or nobodies. The Minister of the Interior, Alicia Arango, she's been present. She's recorded videos saying, "I'm here to talk, but they refuse to talk to me." It seems a little bit strange. We don't have things like this in Britain, but it would be unusual for any group in the country to demand an audience with the Queen. Not even all countries' representatives get audiences directly with our head of state. It seems to me quite odd that they're insisting that Duque is the only person who can sort this. Seems strange.
Yeah, do you think there's a bit of an entitlement in this? And I know we might be kind of treading on dodgy ground saying this, but Indigenous here, they kind of go, well, look, this was our country. You guys, as Creoles or whatever, kind of came and invaded and took over the place. So we should get special treatment.
Yeah, I mean, again, you're right. It's difficult to accuse a group that are so badly treated by society in general of being sort of entitled. I mean, that would seem ludicrous. But yeah, it does seem odd that they're taking such a hardline stance, and I don't quite know why that is. Anyway, they've left. There's thousands of people currently on their way through Armenia, Ibagué, Fusa, I think they go to next, and then basically they'll stop in Soacha, just on the doorstep of Bogota, by the end of the weekend. I would imagine they're talking about Sunday. Wouldn't be surprised if it ends up being Monday. And then, of course, from there, they'll move into the capital to join the bigger demonstrations for the 21st of October.
Yeah, and you mentioned the 21st. I want to get to that in a second. I don't want to be facetious about this, but you mentioned that it'll probably be Monday. I hope that their due time isn't a Colombian Monday, and it'll be Monday next week. But anyway, no, that aside, just when I was looking into this, I read that this was according to the National Indigenous Organization of Colombia, that 167 at least Indigenous have been killed during Duque's term in office, just over 2 years. I don't know how that stands, because I tried then to compare it with other. I don't know, would you know, like, is that a lot, or in this country is that kind of almost par for the course when you single out a group per se like that?
It's very hard to say. I mean, what is a lot is what we come down to. Remember that Indigenous peoples in Colombia are incredibly low in number. If we talk about the absolutes, we're talking about really, really low numbers. We're not talking about a country like Bolivia or Peru, which has quite significant indigenous populations. The Wayuu are the biggest single group, and of course they're nothing to do with this. You know, we're also not talking about any of the Amazonian peoples or communities. We're not talking about anybody in the Santa Marta. We're not talking about any of the Costeños, even the North Pacific groups. So this is relatively localized. When we say that it's a minga indigena, it's really only one region is what we're talking about. We're certainly not talking about a mass mobilization of all the indigenous cultures of this country.
Yeah, but of course, as you mentioned at the outset, it is a region down that southwest that's been hit particularly badly with the drugs trade and things like that. And one of their other concerns is it's to do with environmental issues in terms of fracking and the resumption of spraying of crops, which of course they would say is damaging their way of life. It's kind of the cure-all. Let's spray everything down there, but what kind of damage it's doing to the environment. So it's a delicate situation, because I guess Duque is getting pressure from Big Brother to the north to resume that spraying of the coca leaf.
Yeah, I mean, there's some really serious environmental concerns over all kinds of things that happen on indigenous land. So, I mean, coca spraying is one of the big ones, as is fracking. But there's also things like, illegal gold mining and all kinds of horrendousness because in part, and I think this is where their demands come from, the government just doesn't seem to care about what happens on indigenous land. So it doesn't seem to be protected in any real kind of way. It doesn't seem to be looked after. There aren't military units sitting around protecting it. Of course, complicating that is the fact that a number of these communities are a bit wary with very good reason of having lots of Colombian military kind of wandering around the place.
Yeah, of course, a matter of trust there. Who can you trust in this country is the other issue. Interesting, you mentioned the land. I saw somebody commenting on a story about this. Obviously, somebody who's not pro-Indigenous, to put it that way, that the amount of land that they have for their number is quite extraordinary. But anyway, if people are interested in getting involved in this, do send us a message using the live comment facility as you're watching this live, or if you're watching it already done and dusted, recorded on YouTube or on Facebook, you can send us a tweet at Bogotá Post or wherever you are watching us. A little bit later on, in about 10 minutes, actually, we're going to be talking about sport in Colombia, all the various sports that you can play, from the very popular football to the unknown, Ollie's favorite, underwater rugby. But continuing with our news, we kind of talked about this last Thursday, Ollie, that Álvaro Uribe might be released. And then I think it was the very next day, or was it Saturday? I think Saturday morning.
Saturday, yeah.
Released from his very difficult prison conditions that he had on his finca up in the coastal department of Cordoba, wasn't it? But he's out now and already causing we'll say, I won't say consternation, but doing what Uribe does and rocking the system as much as he can.
Yeah, and getting support from Donald Trump himself, who's clearly looking for Latino and I guess specifically Colombian expat votes in the States. But yeah, quite why he's wading into it, I don't know. I mean, Uribe being released, it's hardly surprising news, is it? I don't think anybody is looking at that and thinking, well, this has come out of absolutely nowhere. You know, the big question really is going to be what happens with his trial. Putting to one side the idea that it's going to be a free and fair trial for now, because I think we can discount that as a possibility. The real question is, will they go for him? He's lost a little bit of popularity in the last 5-6 years. He stays pretty popular. He's around 40% approval ratings, positive image, which is pretty high. Which is pretty high, to be honest, for an ex-president. So, yeah.
It's just interesting you say that, because I saw a headline in El Tiempo that more than 70% of people said that in the of course, this is a poll taken today, but in the 2022 general or presidential election, they would not vote for how do they put it? Que dice Uribe or whatever. Lo que dice Uribe, which is interesting because I think by the time 2022 comes along, that'll change. It almost seems that you nearly always get at least 35-40% that will vote for whoever Uribe says.
Yeah, I mean, again, he's polarizing, isn't he? But his support is dropping off quite noticeably in the past sort of 3, 4, 5 years. So, I mean, this could be the moment where, this trial could finally be the moment where he, where the tide turns. Then again, he's a master escape artist. This is a situation he's been in time and time again. So who knows?
Yeah, it would be interesting. Yeah, interesting to see how it does play out. I think it was James Robinson, the British economist. I was going to call him historian. I don't think he's a historian, economist, but who wrote Why Nations Fail, and he's focused a lot of his work on Colombia, so he knows it quite intimately. He still does a summer school in Los Andes every year, I believe. But he was talking about the various elites in Colombia. So this is kind of one elite coming after Uribe, and of course he is that populist president in the mold. Yeah, I was going to say in the mold of a Trump.
But that's the question. I mean, Uribe is not one of the traditional elites. I mean, I think we could certainly say that he's certainly very rich and powerful now, but he's a small player if we're talking about the big families, the genuine real elites of Colombia. He's not that sort of rich, and he's certainly not that sort of powerful. He does, in a democratic setting, command an incredible level of support. The question is, at what point does he stop being useful for the real sort of elite powers behind him? That's what will be interesting, I think.
Speaking of that 2022 election, one person that I heard mentioned as a potential candidate for the Centro Democrático, Uribe's party, is Carlos Holmes Trillo, the current Minister of Defence, and he's under fire. He has been really since we've started this live program, with all the massacres that we mentioned and the problems of insecurity in the country. He wouldn't seem like a very popular choice, but he's been mentioned. Will he last as Defence Minister is the other question, though, Ollie.
Well, and actually, if he stepped down or resigned now, that's certainly not a disaster. He's got a good 18 months to recuperate himself. That's not a bad position to be in, to be honest. People's political memory is pretty limited here. Let's not forget, Brendan, that, just 5-6 weeks ago, a lot of Bogotá was in flames, which, seems to have just faded into the history. Almost a year ago, we had that crazy night with conjuntos being attacked or not attacked or what was going on. So even if you just think about the last 11, 12 months in Bogotá, 18 months away, very hard to say who's going to be properly in contention there. And I'd also be a bit careful of saying that he's unpopular for any of these things. Actually, I would suspect quite a lot of people like the mano firme of the Centro Democrático much more than the Corazón Grande.
Yeah, I think we've both probably written articles related to that in the last few weeks and years as well. I wouldn't disagree with that. And you mentioned earlier about Donald Trump getting involved in Uribe. Of course, that plays well amongst not only some, we'll say, right of center Colombians, but also Venezuelans, when you play the whole socialist card. So linking what's happening in the States right now with Colombia, that's why. And there's a big Latino vote in Florida to be won, and Florida, of course, is a big swing state. Of course, you can't lump all the Latinos together, but Cubans who are happy in the States, socialism is not a nice word to them.
No.
And then for a lot of Colombians and obviously a good number of Venezuelans. So that's why Donald Trump is playing into that. Have you got a comment for us there?
I have, and I do find Trump's posturing fantastic, but I really want to address this point from Paula Andrea Perez Rubiano, who was writing in, I think, last week. I recognize the name. She asks if we have long-lasting corruption in our home countries, such as the one we have here with Uribe. Now, I'm just going to sidetrack you a little bit here, Paula, because that's quite a specific question you're asking. We don't necessarily have corruption exactly like the Uribe case. But what I will say is that I am fed up and sick and tired of hearing foreigners lambast Colombia for being corrupt, as though corruption does not exist, does not happen in our home countries. It's hypocrisy. It's absolute rank hypocrisy. So long-lasting corruption, Paula. Well, my head of state in Britain was the head of state when my mother was born. Forget all of my life. All of my mother's life, plus all of my life, all that time, it's just been the same old queen. But of course, that's not corruption, that's tradition, so it's okay. If we look at things like the LIBOR scandal, the London interbank exchange rate, I don't want to get too nerdy and into a financial thing here, because it is quite boring fundamentally. But if we look at the number of dollars that were being moved around in just that scandal in the City of London, we are looking at several hundreds of trillions of dollars. It's an absolutely preposterously high number. We're talking about all estimated Colombian corruption for at least the last decade, just in one scandal in the City of London, which was never properly, I mean, and this is the best bit, which was never properly investigated because the numbers are so big that it's one of those things no one wants to really pick at too much. One bank got fined. Everybody agreed they weren't going to continue doing it. We don't really know what's going on. And Brendan, I'm sure you can tell us about something that connects to the theme of sports, but the Irish FA.
Oh, yeah. The Football Association of Ireland, like the head of that, the CEO for years, he was on a salary of close to €400,000. I mean, this is the Football Association of Ireland, the Republic of Ireland soccer football team. I mean, ridiculous. They didn't. When was the last time they qualified for a World Cup? 2012, and he saw fit to be the highest. I think about the highest paid football director that was going. I was going to say just another couple of things. One quote I always use, I borrow from Animal Farm and Orwell, is that all politicians and countries are corrupt, but some are more corrupt than others. And I think some are better at hiding it. And maybe those countries with a longer tradition are better. Colombia are just maybe a bit naive about it, or don't care a lot of the time about hiding it. Yeah,
actually, I think that's one of the really interesting points, actually, is that, when you look at international corruption indexing, so Transparency International is really the gold standard on this. Inevitably, they ask questions about whether or not you bribe people to get results. So absolutely, the fact that police people can be bribed in Colombia, the fact that small petty authorities get bribed, that's very visible corruption, which means people report that they see it a lot more. What we tend to have in the United Kingdom, and I'm sure it's the same in Ireland, there's a lot of really clandestine, hidden corruption. Now, just because it's not open doesn't mean it doesn't happen.
Yeah, one other thing I was going to say as well, Paula, if you're still, and hopefully you are still listening, of course you're still listening to us, but in Ireland, one thing I'll say is we had a minister for finance who, after then became our prime minister, it's Taoiseach, the term we use in Ireland, he didn't have a bank account while he was Minister for Finance. And he used to get dig-outs, he called them, so little bits of help, payments from his friends that went very much unaccounted for. So he claims it was all above board, but he just didn't have a bank account to register these things or whatever and get these dig-outs. There you go. So corruption is everywhere. I think we should be joined by Freek soon enough. He might be waiting in the wings to join us because, like in terms of news, sport was news, of course, in the last week. I don't think we've anything else newsy to talk about for the moment.
Well, no, but while we're on corruption, of course, that's a key component of sports news this week. So, turns out the Colombian press aren't allowed to go to Colombia football matches, apart from Caracol, of course. But nonetheless, up he pops again, Carlos Holmes Trujillo. Apparently, his kids are big football fans.
No, Oli, let's not get ourselves into trouble. It was the Justice Minister, not the
sorry, yes.
Yeah. Sorry, Carlos, you're safe on this one.
You're quite correct.
Yeah, the Justice Minister. But anyway, go on to finish the point.
But his kids really love football. So, hey, that's okay. They really love football, so he can go to the match.
Yeah, exactly. What other reason do you need? Kids love football. Doesn't matter that another few 100,000 Colombian children as well would love to go to the game in these times, but they can't. But anyway, the Justice Minister went along to the game, so that's caused a little bit of a scandal. I think it's died down. It will die down. The game is over. I don't see it I don't think he'll resign over the matter. But of course, in terms of performances on the field as well, we talked last week, Ollie, that 1 point would be terrible for Colombia, or 0 would, of course, be ridiculous. But with 4 points, not bad. And Venezuela were pretty much a pushover in the end.
Oh, yeah. I mean, the second half of that match was, frankly, as awful a half of football as I've seen in many a long time. Venezuela just didn't look like they... I mean, I actually thought for a while they weren't going to come out at for the second half. So yeah, that was that was all a bit strange. Colombia really did the business in the first half, but they were very obviously, I think, in second gear for most of that. Yeah. Well, talking of which, let's get the official quote. So, Freek, how do you rate? We should introduce him. This is Freek Huigen, the Bogotá Post sports editor, a particular aficionado of football in particular. So, Freek, what did you think of Colombia's performances on Friday and Tuesday?
Well, hello, Oli, Brendan. Thanks for having you in your show. Straight to the point, huh? Football.
Straight to the point.
Straight to the point. I think Colombia's performance against Venezuela and Chile was pretty good. 4 points out of the first 2 games, an away game in Chile and a home game against Venezuela, who are sometimes seen as like a difficult team to play. The local rival, is not bad. It has to be said that Venezuela, with all the trouble they're in, missing their star player who was stuck in China, are not the strongest rival to play, but they coped with it really well, Colombia, and we've seen a good performance.
Yeah, well, the bigger one you mentioned was the point in Santiago, because I know it's the early days in the campaign and it's a long campaign, but that might be that point, that late Falcao goal. They might look back and say that point they got in Santiago was one of those crucial points that brought them to the campaign. Because you'd imagine it'd be between Colombia, Chile, Ecuador vying for those kind of last spots on the plane to Qatar. So that'd be pretty crucial. And another question for our expert as well, while I'm at it. Was it a penalty for Chile, do you think?
To start with your question, in VAR time, definitely. In normal time, who knows? But with the VAR, those things are not getting away anymore.
I wouldn't have given it, but that's why I'm not a referee.
Or a football player.
No, the point in Chile was very important, and obviously, who else than good old Falcao? Because in a normal situation, Brazil is going to walk this qualifier, and then maybe Argentina, Uruguay, then Colombia, Chile. They are fighting for 3rd, 4th place, I think. So, yeah, that late equalizer in Chile was, I think, deserved, and also very, very valuable for the rest of the tournament. But obviously, we're only 2 matches, so yeah.
Yeah, there's a long way to go, but it's one of those things that you're taking points off a rival, so it should work in their favour, you'd imagine. The other thing we've been mentioning in the Premier League is all the goals. We had 20 goals, I believe, in this eliminatores qualifier round, the 2 rounds, I think. 20 goals over the 2 rounds. So that trend's been continued of lots of goals in games. For you, Freek, in terms of why do you think that's happening? We're getting lots of goals.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I think the connection's a bit slow here, I think, with Freek.
Okay.
Probably from my side, yeah. What was the question? Sorry?
No, I'm just saying that there's a lot of goals. It seems that football games in these coronavirus COVID times, we're getting lots of goals, except when the Republic of Ireland are playing, they can't score a goal. But in other games, we're getting lots of goals. I mean, like, is that
Yeah.
something to do that it might seem like a training session? I mean, I know it's not, but when there's no fans at the stadium, that maybe they feel a little bit freer to have a go. I don't know. It's weird.
It could be with the lack of pressure from the stands, but I guess they're just eager after a 3-month break to show what they can.
Yeah,
True.
yeah, I guess. Exactly. Now, go on, Ali, yeah?
So what's coming up, Freek, in kind of Colombian sporting news while we're still talking about the news? What's coming up in Colombian sporting news? I mean, the Merseyside derby is almost a Colombian affair now.
Yeah, the Merseyside derby for fans Sunday at 6:30 in the morning Colombian time. It's going to be a big game for Colombia. It's James will be playing, you'd imagine. Jerry Mina, he wasn't playing in Chile, so whether he'll make the Everton Liverpool game remains to be seen. There's no news yet whether he'll be playing, but yeah, all eyes in Colombia on that match. It was only, I think, 3 weeks ago that the first ever fully Colombian goal was scored in the Premier League when James put a free kick onto Mina's head and he headed it home. So yeah, Colombian power in the Premier League.
By the way, what's your take on James there? Because Tony Asprilla came out when news broke that James was going to Everton, and he was scratching his head saying this was a ridiculous move. He seems to have been proven wrong. It seems to have worked wonders for both James personally and Everton Football Club. They're flying it.
So far, so good. We're only 4 matches in, so it's early to call victory. But yeah, James has been really good and is in the UK. He's seen as one of the best signings of the league this year so far. Yeah, if he stays fit during the winter time, because when he was at Bayern, he said that he didn't like it that much because it was so cold. Well,
it's never cold in England.
In Liverpool. So yeah, if he stays fit, I mean, he followed his favorite manager, Carlo Ancelotti, who in Real Madrid gave him most chances and really liked him, brought him to Bayern Munich and gave him lots of chances. And now he's on a slightly lower level. He's not in any of the top 10 of the world anymore. And it's all eyes on him. And yeah, so far he's taking it to him. And you see the quality that he's had for the past 10 years. It was gone, or you didn't see any of it when in his last year at Real Madrid. But those first 4 games in England were quality.
Yeah, no, he's got like his Mike Myers and Austin Powers. He's got his mojo back, it seems. I think I might put my sneaky 5,000 pesos on Everton for the league title before they beat Liverpool on Sunday, and their odds shorten even more. But
if they can match the mighty Aston Villa.
Well, there you go as well. There's a few surprises. Just going to say, guys, tuning in, we are talking about Colombian sports. We will be moving on to more general discussion. We're not just talking about football. So if you want to get involved, do write to us on the live comment facility. Or if you're watching us after the event, as in a recorded program, you can always tweet at Bogotá Post, and we will take all comments into account moving forward and suggestions or whatever for topics. Oli, so that's kind of the news side of football and things like that put to one side, I think. Or is there anything else to talk about, guys?
Well, I wanted to stress the appearance of young Camden-born Steven Alzate, born and raised in London and now in the Colombian team, only 22 years old. And yeah, had to come on in a very important game against Chile. Had a few difficult moments, but once he was in the game, he became one of the better players. You can see that he had football intelligence, so-called. He's not particularly strong, he's not particularly quick, but he sees the space really well. With the pressure, he was the one who read the game really well. Could be a nice addition, an unexpected addition to the Colombian team for the next 10 years.
What club is he from? Where does he play?
Brighton.
He's in Brighton.
Oh, okay. Okay. News to me. I'm going to have to check that guy. I'm born in Canada, obviously to Colombian.
Colombia had taken the Jack Charlton approach, Brendan. I'm sure you'll be familiar with it.
I am. Well, practically any Irish manager we could do with unearthing a star right now. As I said, we've a new manager at the Republic of Ireland just briefly. 4 games in, and we haven't scored 1 goal and haven't looked like scoring a goal either.
Even against Wales. So, I mean, Freek, what other sports are popular here in Colombia? I mean, obviously, as a cycling fan, I find it fantastic here. But what else sort of gets Colombians going?
Well, it's mainly football and cycling that are really popular among people watching. Obviously, there is, especially on the coast, there is also a large basketball, baseball base, so to speak. At the moment, the basketball league is on the television. Even they're doing their yearly month-long competition at the moment in Cali. So that's one thing that's restarted. But
can't wait to tune into that. That's made my week. Thanks for that, Freek.
But obviously the big ones are football, are cycling that people really follow. The other one that has gained a lot of traction recently is tennis, because we've got a Colombian Grand Slam winners at the moment. Robert Farah and Juan Sebastián Cabal, they won Wimbledon in 2019 and the US Open, which was a unique performance for Colombia. And a young girl coming up, Maria Camila Osorio, who was junior champion at the US Open in 2019. So at 17 years old, if I'm correct. So who knows? That will be a sport that people will be watching more and more as well.
Well, in fairness, I'm not sure how much does a racket cost and to buy a few balls, because there are a fair number of concrete tennis courts around. So if you were gifted, I guess, a racket, I'm thinking of poorer people, because obviously football is just easy to play and inexpensive, and obviously it is the global sport. But tennis, if you're more individualistic, it wouldn't be too expensive to take up, unlike maybe golf where you need all the irons and things like that.
Well, and a massive tract of land.
Well, yeah. Well, there is golf here, of course, but it's expensive to play.
Yeah.
You're right, Brendan, but historically it's mainly been the wealthy people that have been good at tennis because of having to rent the courts. It's not as easy as baseball or football that are a lot easier to do because you need a ball, and with baseball you need a stick that you can use as a bat. With tennis,
I could also think of another reason you'd have a bat walking around some of the cities. But anyway, just
cynical, so cynical. So, who are our Colombian heroes, Freek, around at the moment? I mean, coming back to cycling, obviously, Egan Bernal gained a lot of popularity. I think came out of nowhere for many people in the popular consciousness last year. But it's always perplexed me that Nairo continues to be much, much, much more popular, I think, than Egan still. Perhaps because he's been around for longer, perhaps because he's got a good backstory, the pedaling up on a cheap old bike and coming out of the hills of Boyacá, which I think is a story that resonates in the Colombian psyche, as it were. But who else have we got that, if we're talking about big name athletes?
big name athletes, then you have to look, apart from the footballers and the cyclists, it's mainly the Olympians. One of the most famous Colombian athletes is obviously Mariana Pajon. She is the only Colombian who's ever won 2 gold medals in the BMX. And someone like Catherine Ibargüen.
Well, Freek, say it. What is she? She's the
leaping lady.
his favorite phrase.
Yeah, she is from Apartado, has a very difficult backstory as well, and has been dominating the triple jump for most of the past 6 years. There's now one big rival who's beaten her several times from Venezuela, but apart from that, I think she was 3 or 4 years unbeaten. Won Olympic gold in Rio in 2016 and silver in London in 2012. And yeah, she's a very popular figure under Colombians because she's got a great smile that she often shows, very positive mindset, but also is keen to help the people who are less off, the people who don't have the materials, the fellow athletes who don't get the help they are supposed to get. So basically speaks up against corruption from higher up and also for her fellow athletes.
Yeah, would it be fair to say she's more popular than what you call her? Pajon. There you go. I can't remember the other one's name. Yeah, Pajon.
Possibly. I mean, athletics is a big sport worldwide, and BMX not so much. And it helps that in Colombian society, where Mariana Pajon is from a very well-off family, and Catherine Ibargüen not so much, the majority of Colombians are also not so well off, and they easier identify with someone like Ibargüen than Pajon. But when they are in their competition and one of them is winning, then entire Colombia is behind them. There's no doubt.
Yeah, of course. Because, talking about rich sports, I guess, probably a generation ago now, 20 years ago, 15 years ago, when you had won Pablo Montoya in Formula 1. Now, none of us were in the country back then, but I guess it probably increased the profile. But how many Colombians can really dream of being in Formula 1? I would guess very few.
Getting into auto racing is not easy.
Anywhere.
Montoya set up some tracks in the north, in somewhere between Bogotá and Tunja, really. For the rest, he was very famous back in the days, but he's also a wealthy family. So some Colombians find it hard to
relate to that. Yeah,
to relate.
I can understand. Yeah, and that's why I think Ibargüen, that kind of idea coming from a working class, poorer background, makes it good. It's a nicer story, whereas somebody who was potentially born with a silver spoon in his or her mouth, not taking away from the quality of the athlete or the performer involved.
But Falcao's from a relatively well-off background, isn't he? And he remains very, very popular, I think.
Yeah. Falcao is like the ideal son-in-law. Religious, never gets into trouble, always very correct in his way of speaking, in his way of dealing with his teammates. His work rate's high, so he's just popular anyway.
Are there any kind of less... I mean, we've got Paula Andrea here is mentioning Rigo, who's the cyclist Rigoberto Urán, possibly most famous for a podium in the Tour de France. But I mean, are there any kind of anti-heroes here in Colombia? I'm struggling to think of anybody, but in England, where there's a few players that we love to hate, some that are not English, like Diego Maradona, some from within our country. You know, we all love to have a go at people like Robbie Savage or people like that. Joey Barton springs to mind.
I mean, I don't think there's very unpopular athletes in general. Like, there's obviously very conflicting figures like Tino Asprilla, who on the one hand was one of Colombia's best footballers ever, and on the other hand is very strong in favor of the police, and the police violence is only fault of the protesters and stuff like that. Someone like James, who on the one hand is possibly the greatest footballer Colombia will ever have, is also someone who said to be often going into nightlife when he has to train, and things hanging around that. But there's no particularly unpopular athletes, as far as I can say, or at least none of the big ones.
And of course, in the 90s, we had the real legends of Colombian football, Higuita and Valderrama and Tino as well. I mean, the scorpion kick has to be one of football's sort of most famous moments, again, in Wembley. Yeah. And then, of course, there's a tragic side to that, the story of Andres Escobar.
Yeah, the 90s marked Colombian football, really, with El 5-0, the 5-0 victory over Argentina with Maradona. The likes of Valderrama, who is one of the other greatest footballers in Colombian history, even though he never made it across the pond. He tried it in France for a while, but it was not a massive success. And yeah, that generation still marks Colombian football. And the manager, Pacho Maturana, despite being blamed for or accused of La Rosca Paisa, he did make a team that was very good. And at the same time, that team was also very problematic with all the things behind it, from the drug trade, the business that they had to play matches, or they went to play matches in Pablo Escobar's self-made prison, and yeah, the tragic death of Andres Escobar as an absolute minimal. As the absolute worst moment of Colombian football, I'd say.
Yeah, I guess it's the contrast with, as you mentioned, that it was kind of in a way, a breakthrough team. Excuse me, to go to the 1990 and the 94 World Cup, and the 98. Did they make it to 98 as well? Yeah. Like, so 3 World Cups in a row, and kind of playing a Colombian brand of football. Because I was reading a thesis, I think it's soon to be published, by an Englishman who used to live here, about Colombian football, and just talking about Colombia used to follow a lot of the Argentinian style, but they wanted to kind of have their own cafetero Colombian style of football, and that was seen to have come with that breakthrough team from 1990 to 1998. Yeah. Now, you mentioned James being perhaps the greatest ever footballer that Colombia will produce. Okay, Valderrama was a bit of a home bird, you could say, but you'd put him on a higher pedestal than Valderrama El Pibe.
Probably. Due to his importance in the World Cup, no, he almost single-handedly finals ever quarterfinals. So yeah, that by itself is already a big feat, and being in the top of Europe for 4 or 5 consecutive years, that's also something that not many players can say. Falcao is obviously up there as well, and Valderrama, Iguaran,
David Ospina.
Yeah. Well, in fairness, yeah, not bad. Well, we've talked a lot, and this was obviously going to happen, talking a lot about football. We did mention at the start that there are more things than football in cycling. In fairness, it's probably good because we an expat audience, and not even an expat audience, but the Colombians who might be interested in our own sports or outside sports that are here. Of course, one of the bigger ones is Aussie rules football has taken hold in Bogotá. I've never gone along. I should, because it's obviously linked to Irish football, so I'd probably be all right at it. But it's fairly popular, Freek, isn't it?
Yeah, Aussie rules football has only been here for about 5 years, and it's going. I just spoke to the president of the Aussie Rules Football Federation in Bogotá, and they're back in training. It's individual training in the park, but they're back on again. Then there's cricket, another one of those imported sports, so you can say, that's not yet restarted. And rugby,
and I won't miss it if it doesn't.
Classic Irishman's approach there.
Yeah. The cricket are planning a tournament in Cali in November, December, if all goes well. And rugby is applying for permissions to restart their league, which could be happening in the next couple of days. Another one of those imported sports. So yeah, there is a lot to do as well if you want to join one of those sports. And a lot of people here are playing 5-side football, which is back open again. There's a lot of cycling going on. And yeah.
Too much, I would say, in fact. The roads can get the road climbs going east out of Bogotá. Going east out of Bogotá. They're getting quite jammed up, I think, at weekends.
Sometimes, yeah. I have to mention the Sunday during quarantine in July, where basically they had open patios. I went up there at 7 a.m, and on the way down, it was pure traffic of cyclists. It could have been like 20,000 people or even more. Which obviously has to do with the fact that there's not much else to do. But yeah, cycling has got such a big boost in Colombia that with the likes of Nairo, Rigo, Egan and Lopez and all the others, that lots of people are practicing at the moment.
Okay. Well, maybe you should come up this side if you think there are too many people, because I heard next to El Codito, there are fewer people cycling up simply because, and I'm saying this with a smile, it's not funny, but there's been a few robberies of bikes and different things there. So it's actually not the safest. Now, maybe there are more police on the route and it's safer at the weekend, but if you're doing it during the week, I think it's kind of seen as it's a bit of a risk. Quick question for both of you. Have you played 5-a-side here? I ask because I tend to prefer to play with foreigners and against Colombians rather than with Colombians.
Oh, really? Well, that's
I tend to find
isn't it?
that they, if I'm playing with Colombians, it's like, they won't pass me the ball.
Well, they're good judges of talent, Brendan.
I look at I have a right style. That's what I say. I get stuck in. Don't get me wrong. I'll give it everything. Yeah, I wouldn't be Mr. like skillful, put it that way, but I'll get stuck in. No, I can hold my own, but no, I found that there's obviously a different mentality to play football compared to the Northern European style. The kind of Latino was more like Southern Europeans. I think it was somebody was it wouldn't make sense that it was Pochettino saying this to Tottenham, but he was referring to whichever manager it was, referring to one player, just saying like, he was doing too much rolling around on the ground and that kind of stuff. I know that's kind of rampant in football all the time, but I'm not a fan of that play acting.
It's competitive. That's definitely true.
That's a diplomatic answer, Freek.
Well, I've got to say, Brendan, you're going to have to put your hands where your mouth is on Aussie rules football. I think they're a pretty competitive bunch. If I'm not wrong, they're the South American champions.
Yeah, I think they went to Chile and played games as a team down there. Yeah, in terms of playing, I've played a bit of rugby. I played more 5-a-side and stuff like that. And I did play an 11-a-side soccer game here with one of the Gomelo schools. They needed an extra player, and I notched up a goal on that as well. So there you go, Ollie.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'll certainly be eating my words.
3-2 victory. It was an important goal. But rugby, I would like to get back into again. The only time I did play it here, I have to say the officiating, I wasn't that impressed with it. They let a lot go, round the neck tattles and things like that, where we're kind of like, yeah, it's fine. So felt like you were taking your life into your own hands.
Who plays rugby here? I mean, I'm intrigued. Like, we talked about tennis being a mainly upper class sport. Football crosses all divides. Cycling at high levels is very posh, I think, but at lower levels, not so much.
But universities, nearly all. Well, I won't say nearly all, but I know Tadeo used to have a team, or at least I used to pass by Tadeo, and every Thursday they'd be out just doing a little touch rugby training thing. And then the one time I went for training here, it was way up. Well, I say way up north. It's actually close to where I live now, but at the time I was living in the centre, and it felt like it was another city.
Miles away, yeah.
Well, I didn't get back until midnight, so I was like, I'm not doing this all the time, which is ridiculous. But yeah, the universities play. I don't know, Freek, do you know other teams?
Not really. There's not lots of associated football. Or
Medellin is kind of seen as the capital of rugby, actually, unofficial capital of rugby, which kind of to me doesn't make sense. You would think it'd be a colder place, just considering the sport, but Medellin, yeah, it's taken off there. But the women seem to be better.
Generally, Medellin and Cali are seen as more sporty cities than Bogota, no?
I've always, easier to be outside. You see, I've always thought Colombia should be excellent at sevens. I don't really understand why they don't really aggressively target sevens. There's a lot of short, stocky guys here, explosive, square, look like a fridge. I can see they'd have trouble getting locks, but yeah, there's plenty of guys here, I think. Him running at speed, that could really do damage. You wouldn't want to tackle him.
Yeah.
Anyway, we're getting to the minute here, aren't we?
Yeah, I was just going to quickly say, because some people might be wondering, God, you never mentioned like the national sport of Tejo. That's all to come in another. Today was more the kind of non-drinking sports that you're not obliged to have a beer while you're playing or be slightly intoxicated. So anyway, yeah, that kind of nearly brings us up to the end of the proceedings. Ollie, what are we going to be chatting about next week? Not sure if it's Freek's favorite topic.
Potentially the most Colombian thing of all, music. And if we can bring ourselves to do it, maybe even dancing. Not actual dancing on the show, I'll be very clear about that. It's a red line. But we might mention people dancing. So yeah, I guess we'll be looking at things like vallenato, bambuco, salsa, all kinds of things.
It seems intriguing. Well, we're being told by the producer here that we have to wrap up, so that's us done. Freek, thanks a million for joining us. It's been a pleasure. The three unwise men. Thanks for listening, guys. Until next week.
Ciao.
Ciao, ciao.
Bye bye.